Hey friends, Rachel here from Rachthestamper.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make this double Z-fold card. Hopefully yours will be a little straighter. This is like an uphill street. I clearly wasn't stamping correctly. So this is a really cute card. It has two layers to it. So your regular background and then your houses, which I colored with watercolor pencils. So I'm going to show you a couple tips. I did also use a retired product, which there's probably something else you may be able to find on the market, or maybe you still have some of this, the Snowfall Accent Puff Paints. I'm going to tell you, one thing about this, you really do have to make sure you shake it well because it's definitely very runny and it does take a little bit to heat, but once you get it heated and it sets, it does really keep a nice puff. But if you have trouble with it and it's more runny than you think, definitely, it says on here, shake really well before you use. And I've just been keeping mine upside down so the tip is ready to use. So that's one thing you could use. Maybe you have some glitter puff that you could use. Maybe you just want to use some Wink of Stella, but I'll show you that at the end. I also did a little bit of snowflakes with white craft ink, and then I white heat embossed these sentiments. Now these sentiments are very old. These are from two that I just pulled out to use. Farmhouse Christmas has the From Our Home to Yours because I figured with all the houses, and then Framed and Festive had Merry Christmas. You could also do Merry Christmas from all of us, so maybe we'll do that for the second one, or maybe you have a sentiment that you prefer to use. But I wanted to show you a couple things. So when you do this, I made the mistake a couple times of stamping my houses incorrectly. So you have your Z fold. So this is 2 1/8 and then 5 1/2. And if you do it like this, it's going to be the same. So it's just going to lay on top of your card, which doesn't make a fold. So you have to make sure that you cut a piece. This is 2 1/4. This is thick white, 2 1/4, same length, but you want it to be opposite. So it does the opposite part. Okay, one other tip that I have for you, and another thing I wanted to show you is when you do these, granted, I did not press my images hard, or I must not have held it long enough because I had to stamp again and I ended up with a ghost image. Really make sure that you're using your mat. Take your time. This was too short, so I ended up just using the same color marker to kind of reconnect it there. If you want to add those, you don't have to add those if you don't want to. I did my little smoke stacks out of the chimney, or wisps of smoke. Same with watercolor pencil. I just didn't water over them. So a lot of this stuff is pretty, I don't want to say self-explanatory, but it's kind of like I just try. And if I think it looks good, then I'll continue using it. If not, I'll do a different idea. I did draw in the extra snowbanks in here just with a watercolor pencil. But this, and I don't know if you can tell the difference, this has actually not been watered with anything, if that makes sense. So when I use watercolor pencils, a lot of times I will just use the blender pen because it does the same thing but without water. So since this is not watercolor paper, you want to use something that's not going to be super wet. But if you can tell the difference, this still has brush strokes here, and this has been done with the blender pen. So it's definitely a lot softer. Certainly you could do any one. It brings the greens together a little bit better in the tree. But what you want to do is you want to stamp these images and color them in before you fold it, because once you fold it, you'll end up with the creases. But if you notice here, this is folded and you can see the crease, but I filled in the crease when I colored this in, so it kind of went into the paper. So you really don't lose or get that big white spot. So those are my tips for you today. We did do a couple things with the cards, and I'm going to show you. There's also someone else did this one at the end instead. So they had the two taller buildings, and then they had this one at the end, which was cute. They're also, you have the church you could fill in with the wall or the bare tree. So lots of fun stuff. So I'm going to show you what we're going to do. So this definitely has several steps. Same thing here. I goofed this one because you can see I double stamped it because I didn't stamp on something correctly. So we have our pieces that are scored. I also put into this one, because it is like there's a lot going on here and there's not a lot of place to write. You could also put a white panel on the back if you preferred. That's just whatever you want to do, up to you. So this is Night of Navy, and it is 5.5 by 8.5, scored at 2 1/8 and 4 1/4. And then we have a piece of basic white, thick basic white, 2 1/4 by the same measurement. So 2 1/4 by 8.5, and then scored it again, 2 1/8 and 5.5. But it's going to go opposite. So hopefully you can see those score lines, so you can see how they're opposite. So you have 2 small and a big and 2 small, because otherwise it will lay flat and it doesn't really look very nice. So this is not been scored, it's just completely flat as is. So what I'm going to do is grab my ink, and I'm going to put this on here just to ensure that I don't goof it up. And I am using VersaFine because it gives really good detail. So let me show you. Let's see. I think I'm still going to go with my same pattern because I think it looks cute. I like it. We need this. And my little snow. We need the tree. And let's do these houses. And then the snowflakes we can do afterwards because we have another step to do anyway. All right, so I'm just gonna slide this over for now. We don't need this yet either. So kind of just want to make sure 2 things, that you have your paper straight, and when you put your stamp on that you can see where you're going to stamp. So instead of going uphill like mine did here, like these were built by someone who was drinking when they built their houses, that they're actually straight. So just do your best to kind of make it straight. And give it a second, because photopolymer does take a second to transfer. So there's that. And we'll do the tree in the middle. Then we're going to do those same 2 houses again. Again, trying to make sure they're straight. And actually, and I know we have a line here, but it'll mostly disappear. I'm going to put this little tiny bear tree in as well. Let me put this house in first. So I'll put my final house in. And this one could be up higher a little bit if you want. It just really depends on what you want to do. Put this tree here. All right, perfect. So I'm going to let this dry for a minute because VersaFine ink is a pigment ink, so it does take a little bit extra to dry. So in the meantime, I'm going to move this over. And I'm going to very carefully, where's the ink I need? I'm going to grab my Azure Afternoon, and I'll show you what I did for the loops here. So I have my little, this one's a little bit bigger than I wanted it to be. I'm going to kind of loop these together. There we go. This one really, unless I decide to do some very fancy masking, it's not going to go. So I'm going to just pretend like this is the town, this is a house. We're not going to have a connecting one there because I didn't space it out quite as much as I wanted to. All right, so if you need, like this one's kind of flying off into space here. So I probably, and I did this a couple times, and what did I do? I ended up looping it. I connected this back in. So this is a little high, and that was me being silly when I did it. So we'll just kind of bring this here. I'm going to just use my marker very lightly, just like that. And what I'll do is once we get in here, I will do something with a little bit of a post. And maybe we'll just go with creative license and we won't worry about it. But we'll address that when we get to it. So I'm going to let this dry for a minute. Then for this background, I don't know if you can tell, but it's a little bit darker at the top and the bottom. So what I did is I grabbed my blending brush and my Night of Navy ink, and I just add a little extra ink kind of around the edge so the center would look a little bit lighter. So you don't have to do this. You can skip it if you prefer. But it just kind of gives a little bit of extra contrast. Really, you really can see it in person. It probably really will not translate very well with this video, but, and again, the middle is going to be mostly covered, so I'm really just doing the outside, kind of like a, I guess like a vignette. All right, so there's that. And now I'm going to, this we do need to let dry before we go ahead and add our snowflakes. But I want to go ahead and mount this so I don't forget. Now, as we were talking about earlier with pigment inks, the white craft ink is also pigment ink. So this does take a little bit longer to dry. But this is very old. Now they come uninked. I'm fairly certain it is still a foam pad, but they come uninked. I shouldn't say foam. They're all foam now. They used to be linen. And you have to add the ink to it because a lot of them were somehow like exploding during transit. So this one is, you can see, super old. All right, so in the meantime, what we're going to do is I'm going to grab my watercolor pencils and I'll color some of this so you can see it. And I'm going to try not to be too long, but you know, it is coloring, so it is what it is. We're going to go with Balmy Blue, which looks really dark ironically here, but it's not. So for the Balmy Blue, I'm going to I'm adding this kind of right by the snow line. And then I added a little bit more to kind of give you that layer of snow on anything that looks like it would have snow on it. And you can really make these as much or as little as you want. So I probably will do some of the coloring, but I might not actually water or blend all of it because I don't know how long you all want to be here. So we're going to grab this on the house, same thing, kind of just adding there. Maybe I should have done a little bit of this ahead of time, but so in the meantime, we can just chat. I don't know if you all are getting ready to celebrate Thanksgiving. It is obviously very early in November here still. We're only at the 9th. We're approaching Veterans Day, but you know, anytime that comes to food, I do love eating. So, and what I tried to do was, if I had the door, I kind of tried to pick something that would be contrasting for the color. And this one just reminded me of a present. So I ended up going with something that was kind of like red and green for that one particular one. And I made like all of the bottom of the windowsill, excuse me, windowsills darker. The stoop, as we call this in Baltimore, or the steps. Kind of pick something slightly complementary. On some of these, you'll see with the windows, I had some of the windows so it looked like someone would be in there with a light, and then the rest of them I filled in gray. So it just looked like the windows were out, which I thought that was a pretty cool idea. I did do all of the chimneys red, just because I thought that was something that would be nice to be continued through the whole thing. And the cool part about watercolor pencils is you don't really have to get it precise where you're going. You just kind of have to get it mostly in the area. Here is my basic gray, so I'll just have my smoke trails. These have a little bit more of an uptick in their wind since they're not going straight across. With the tree, I added in a lot of green. You are going to have to be careful with your blender pen just because I did put that blue in probably not my smartest area since it'll cover over. And when you do use your blender pen, it will reactivate the ink. However, the good part is blue and green will just make a different shade of green. So we'll probably be okay there. And when you do your layout, if you don't like that connecting because of the way it lines up with the houses, either be more cognizant of where you put your houses or just don't put your strings up. Either one would be fine. Go over here and we'll just do some orange. Would love to be doing something that involved some skiing. That would be fun. We'll do crushed curry for this one. For not really Thanksgiving because it doesn't snow early enough here in Maryland. Really hoping we get a major snowstorm this year because we have gotten severely gypped in some time for the whole snow factor here, which is very sad, especially for me because I love to be home making something and seeing it snow. Plus, it's fun for Christian. He loves snow. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to do my windows, whatever it is I'm going to decide. So if I have like 2 windows downstairs, or maybe there's just a bedroom window lit and the family room, this one will just have just this one bedroom window. These people have 3 stories. Oh, and the other thing is these also, on this one particular one, they have shutters. So if you're doing anything with these, make sure you get your shutters. I just did them the same color as the roof. We'll do a red here. Real red. The watercolors are still available. There are 2 different packs of watercolor pencils, which is super. I think anyway. Gives you a lot more choice. And oops, I mixed that one. And the other, what I did for the other windows was I just went in with basic gray. So that way they would have more the appearance of being dark. But what I was going back to saying with the watercolor, you don't really have to fill it in edge to edge, because when you blend it with your blending pen, you'll really hit the whole rest of it, which is nice. So you don't have to really be super precise. You just need to put a little bit of color in there, and you can use these dry, or if you wanted to, you can dip them wet. But once you get them wet, the color is definitely way more intense, and it's permanent. You can't really fool with it, so just keep that in mind. So like some of these, you may notice that I'm not really getting into all the nooks and crannies, and it's just because you don't really have to. You do need to make sure that you clean your brush off, your blender brush off in between, because it will bleed. And if you are going from a darker color to a lighter color, it will contaminate, and that's not really super fun. But you don't even really need to be, I mean, you can see I'm coloring like in all different kind of directions. You don't have to be super precise with this. And I can't remember if we have a brown watercolor pencil, so I might have to use my Cajun Craze for that tree that's hibernating. Where is it? Yeah. Some of these watercolor colors are definitely not what you think they would be for. Like Night of Navy looks really bright. It's not. Which is just kind of funny. All right, we got all of the doors. Let me just get that last house. We have red shutters, Coastal Cabana, and a navy door. This is a very colorful neighborhood, village, whatever. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So now, I'm just going to move these out of the way. I think I've got everything. And I will show you. So what we'll do is just kind of pick a color to start with. I'll start with green. So you'll make sure your brush is clean, and you're just going to go through anything that's green. So the tree, again, we're going to try to be careful because we have that blue. But you'll just really blend the 2 colors together. It's really cool. It's almost like magic. It's really, really neat. So I'm going to a little bit lighter green. I'll just get a little brush, and then I'm not going to touch any of the snow portion right now because I really want to make sure that my brush is clean. So it's almost like, if you all remember, and I used to love these, but do you remember those little They were dots on a paper, and all you needed was a paintbrush. And so I did that darker color, so I wiped off. This is, I can't remember what color this was. Old olive. But so you dipped it in water, and all you needed was the paintbrush, water, because the color was there, and it was just like you reactivated it. That's kind of what it reminds me of when you do these. And I love doing those. I don't think kids today know what they are. I can't even remember what that was called. Like, oh, paint by number. Paint by number. I used to get them for Christian because they used to sell them at the dollar store. But I have not seen them in, I can't even tell you when. All right, so I'm hoping you can see that the color does blend together. So this is not colored, it's just very squiggly, and this one is pretty much filled in. I think this is the one that was a strange color yellow that now I don't really remember what it was. And you will notice when you're doing this and I'm just going to the yellows. I'm trying to be quick because I know this is probably not everybody's favorite part because, you know, you're just watching me color something in, which might be, maybe it is your favorite part, but it feels like it might not be for me. But you can definitely tell if something isn't colored when you look at the whole picture because it looks very, it's missing a lot. There's a lot of white space. So make sure you just take your time to color it in. I'm going to just go through and just do my gray windows that are dark. But it's really kind of neat because it just fills in all the missing space with I think this brush contains glycerin if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so now I want to make sure my brush is definitely clean. I'm actually going to switch sides just for the sake of it. So when I do my snow, because I have all this level here, I kind of try to come from the top so I don't bring any of the color from the bottom into it. If that makes sense. And this is why I was saying you don't really need to, I'm going to flip over to do this. You don't really need to add the puff paint to it if you don't want to, because you will have this blue from the snow. And I know that you might think blue, you don't have to do blue. You could also do gray, but it's just that it needs something to contrast with is the thing. So white looks whiter if it has either a gray or a blue shadow on it, if that makes sense. And then again, you don't really have to do those. Let me just make sure I got my little snowman here. And hopefully you guys can see what that looks like. Oh, forgot the tree. There we go. Okay. So cleaning off my brush, and that is pretty much it. So this is dry. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to do my snow. So I have my white craft ink, and you want to make sure, again, because this is foam and you're using photopolymer, you really want to, I'm going to show you, keep your pinky up. You don't want to have goop all around it. So pinky's up, stamping like you're fancy. That way you don't end up with a whole bunch of, and white craft ink is pretty nice because you can really stamp with it multiple times and it won't be super noticeable. So that's really it. Okay, but we are going to need to use or to add our sentiments. So what I think I said I was going to use was the Merry Christmas from all of us. Again, this is retired, so please forgive me. But since we did do a lot of stuff with this earlier, I am going to take my embossing buddy. And if you wanted to, you could even put some embossing powder on the snow. So I'm just going to tap that. And since the white craft ink is a pigment ink, you don't have to worry about this not being stamped quick enough. But same thing again, when you ink this, you only want it, oh, oopsie. This must have got cleaned with a baby wipe. It's got some fuzz in it. There we go. Make sure you don't have a ring around it. All right, so we have Merry Christmas. And there is this one over here. Okay, from all of us over here. Okay, let me put this out of the way. Since I have it, we'll see what it looks like. I don't know how well it's going to emboss because of the dots, but we'll try it. So I'm going to just hit this first, hit this, and then we'll see if we get any over here. So when you do this with white and white, it just makes the white a little more intense, which is kind of cool. Okay, so I didn't do the embossing buddy on the top though, so we may end up with a lot of stray snow. It'll look like a real blizzard. So I'm going to just put this back. And if you are newer, or maybe you haven't bought it in a while, Stampin' Up! Does not make their own embossing powder any longer. It's now made by Wow, which I'm not familiar with. I'm sure it's great, but I haven't used it personally, so I can't speak of it. So I'm just going to heat my heat tool for a minute, and then we're going to just go over all of this to set our embossing powder. And you want to just move it back and forth, and when it goes from like a dusty to a shiny, it's set. Okay, so that's shiny. This is still kind of dusty. And since I did a lot on this with the blending brush and the embossing, I'm just going to flip it over just to hit the back to kind of flatten the paper out a little bit. All right. And finally, let's see what this looks like. Looks nice. Did I get all of it? I might not have gotten all of it. Let's make sure this is... Okay. So I'm going to fold this. So let me move this out of the way. I'm going to fold this in. And then fold this back. I feel like I did not set all this because I can see it's dusting a little bit. I remember we did talk about this could potentially happen because I didn't use my embossing buddy. So, all right, so there's our background. And then here we have our foreground. So again, these are going to go opposite. So you want this to go in and this to go up. And I'm going to just hit these with my bone folder just to really reinforce the crease. And same with this one. Now, here's one thing I should have told you, and I should have said this ahead of time. I'm going to turn the heat tool on. If you want to add this, and I'm going to show you just because it is a little bit more difficult. If you decide you want to add the puff paint, maybe you've never used it before, maybe somebody gave it to you, maybe you just found it on a clearance or something, but it's super runny. So like I said, you really want to shake it. And the best thing to do is, I shouldn't have scored this yet, is I'm going to flatten it out and I'm going to make where I want it to be, but I'm going to try my very best not to lift it and move it. So I'm going to show you what I mean. So I'm really gently squeezing. I'm trying not to make too much. And the reason I have my heat tool heating is because this really has to get super hot before it actually puffs, which is kind of a pain. I think I have used other ones in the past that were not this difficult to use. So maybe that's another reason why they don't have it anymore, but I don't really know. So I'm going to leave this flat. And then I'm going to bring in my heat tool and I'm going to just kind of concentrate on one area. And once I get it to heat a little bit, I'll show you so you can see. So you really have to keep it in one spot, and you'll notice that it starts to kind of puff, grow up. All right, I'm going to show you so you can see the difference. And it definitely took a little bit of concentration, okay? So this is very liquidy, and then you can see this. It's literally sticking out like 3D snow. So now I just have to do the rest of it. So since I put it all on there, bear with me. Once it gets going, it does go pretty quickly. Almost there, friends. And now that you've seen that, some of you might say, well, that's why that person gave me that, because it took literally forever. And there's still a teeny little wet spot here right in the center, but I don't want to make you suffer anymore. So I'm going to give this just a second to cool off. And move this over. So it is a little bit wonky, but as you cools off, just kind of smooth it out a little bit. And the nice part is once it puffs, it definitely stays puffy. It springs back. Now, I've never mailed a card like this, so I don't really know what it will look like that way. And I probably should have put some on here, but so we're going to just give this just a second. Okay, so now in order to adhere this, because it is a double Z fold card, you want to close it is the best way to do it. I always pick one or the other. I typically will pick the front because I find that that sticks a little better. So I'm going to do the front. So I'm just kind of eyeballing where I want this. Like that. And I'm just setting it down. And I just want to make sure it gets all the way to the edge. So I'm going to just hold this for a sec. Hopefully in the spots where there's no snow. All right, so there's that. And then before you finish, you're going to just put glue all over the back of this. We're going to close this and then hold it. Okay, so I'm going to just close this up, and then once I have it kind of settled there, just press. And hold. And that's it. really fun card. I know that was definitely a couple different techniques and a couple different steps in this because of the bunch of different techniques that we did bring. This is a really pretty card. It's got a lot of detail. Someone will definitely know you put a lot of effort into this. So I know this was a rather long video. We had several different techniques. So thank you so much for sticking with me today. If you'd like to get almost all the products used in this video today, minus the snow, because that is unfortunately not available. Maybe you could find a better snow, and if you do, come back and let us know what it is that you use. Maybe you already have a different company's snow that you use that's not quite as tedious to be able to apply, but I think this is a really fun card, which is also why I said if you wanted to, you could put a little panel on the back to send something to someone. And thank you so very much for joining me today. I hope you learned something new, or you're going to try out maybe a new technique, or get your watercolor pencils out, because they're always really fun to use. If you haven't already, I would love for you to like, subscribe, follow, and please share this with a friend. If you would like to leave me a comment, you can do so below, and all of the supplies will be listed below in the description. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.